Happy 4th of July. I'm here tearing down an old building, making way for a new garage. In the meantime, hope you enjoy this week's episode. We're installing resistors in our turn signal wiring for our Jeep to prevent hyperblink as we are using LED turn signals. Now the kit we got gave us Scotch connectors to hook the wiring together, which would be fine for a while, but to avoid any inevitable corrosion, we've chosen to cut the wires and solder everything together and heat shrink it, which is a much better way to install any electrical component. So we've got our cast iron head sandblasted and ground and ready to weld for our Stover engine. So what we're going to do first is heat this up, get the cast iron good and hot before we start MIG welding it. Now, a lot of guys will use a nickel rod to weld cast iron, which I guess works, seems to work for them. But I've had really good luck just getting the cast iron good and hot before I put the MIG to it. Every repair I've made so far with cast iron has held up, so there's no reason for me to believe this one won't hold up as well. So let's get started and see if we can make this work. I'm not sure if I'm going to weld the entire piece at once. I'm going to start on the top side of the head, your left as you're looking at it, and we'll see what happens from there. I'm sure I'm going to have to come back and heat it up some more. Pretty good so far. Alright, liking that. I think we're going to keep going. Heat it up just a little more. Let's do this back side here first. Looking pretty good. Heat up. I'm going to go into that piece there by the head just a little bit now, even though I'm going to have to come back and redo that later. Finish it up right now. Now, come back, heat up the back side, the side closest to me. Probably don't have to, but it's still a good idea. It's not going to hurt anything. There's plenty of heat in this head right now. Okay. Finish him off. Get it! Okay. All right, so we're pretty much done with the majority of the head. The next thing I'll have to do is, after it's cooled off on its own, we don't want to quench it or anything. We're going to go back into the bottom sides of the heads and grind those out a little bit, add a little bit of weld there, and then we'll belt sand it to get it back smooth for the head gasket. Now, it's a form follows function kind of thing. You can definitely, obviously tell it's been welded, but this is how it was done. Guys back in the day, they would have used stick arc welding or whatever to fix these things. Any kind of epoxies or anything else they had at the time, being this is from 1941. But this is definitely going to hold up. I've got no doubt about that. We're not going to grind it down or finish it off to make it look pretty. In my opinion, this is how it would have been repaired back in the day if somebody had fixed it. And for me, it's a badge of honor. I think it deserves to stay there and be a part of the machine once it's back running again.
We're wrapping our Nova wiring harness with fire tape.
We have some blistering in the deck lid of the Nova, so we're going to grind through them to see what repairs are needed. So you can see we have a hole here that's going to need to be repaired. So we're going to grind into the rest of these blisters to see just how much work is going to be needed. So getting back to the concrete block that I mentioned last week, what I want to do is cast a mold off of the decorative side of this concrete block. And eventually what I'm going to end up doing with it is making decorative faces for the concrete block that I make with an old machine that I have that I demonstrate at steam shows and tractor shows throughout the summer. So I'll explain the process as we're going, and then once we get to that point, this will make a lot more sense. The first thing I'm going to do is spray on some polyvinyl alcohol, which is a release agent. I've used it a lot with making motorcycle parts and things like that, and it works great. Never had an opportunity to use it with concrete before, but let's give it a shot and see what happens. All right, that's a good first coat on it. What I've also done is I've made an apron of cardboard around the concrete block because I need the mold to be larger than the actual concrete block itself. So I put an apron around there that'll act as a level against the decorative part, and so that's why I'm spraying that as well. So we'll see how this works. We're going to wait about 5 minutes and we'll spray on another coat, and then in about 20 we'll be ready to start laying on our resin coat. So it looks like it's putting a nice barrier on the block for us so that our resin won't stick. We'll know in a couple of days. So what I'm going to do here in a minute is put on another or final coat of polyvinyl and let it sit for 20 minutes, and then we're going to start laying the resin. So what I have here is some resin mixed up with some thickening agent. I'm going to put this on first, and I'm going to follow it up with some regular resin and some fiberglass, which is going to build strength into the mold. So we've got our first batch of resin with our thickening agent ready to go. So we're going to put it on to the block. I'm going to take a brush that I've cut the bristles off of just a little bit short. Just spread it around, nice and even. Hopefully. And hopefully I get to the outsides. We have to make sure we push it out enough to get around the cardboard perimeter. And let's brush it on nice and light. I don't want to dig down into it and take a chance on messing up the PVA. Generally when you're doing this kind of stuff, it is done on smooth parts. So the release is a lot better and smoother. So whether this is going to work or not, I have no idea. Now this side does not matter how it looks as long as it's covered. It's the side that's down that's the most important. But what's more important is if it will release itself from the block and give us the actual look that we're looking for of the block itself. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take our other resin and mix it up and lay it on with some fiberglass. Now I've got some pretty big pieces of fiberglass here that I'm going to be putting on here once I've coated them with resin, which I'm doing off camera. Just makes it a little easier, and then you'll be able to see better exactly what I'm doing with it. So all I'm going to do is take this fiberglass and I'm going to saturate it with our resin and then put it on to our piece. So I'm using my brush to saturate the fiberglass pieces, which you'll see in just a second. And then they'll be put on to the back side of that piece like this. Get my perimeter about right. Drag it this way a little if I can. All right, now that's going to bond itself to what I've already put down. Get out any air that's in it. I want this to be pretty strong because when I do pull it up, I don't want it to crack. So here's our last piece on. At least the last one I'm putting on anyway. And we'll see what happens from here. Got a few air bubbles. I'm going to take the last of our resin here and just kind of put it over it. Saturates into it well, gives me some strength, or more strength. I'll let this stuff sit up for several hours. Then we try to pull the two apart. Okay, so there we go. We'll have to wait a few hours before we can pull it apart and see if it worked. So we're back here now with the mold, and the fiberglass is good and hard. We're going to roll it over now and see if we can separate the two and see if this actually worked. Okay, so far so good. I'm going to take a rubber mallet and try to knock the fiberglass pieces loose, or the piece loose. Fingers crossed. Looks like it's moving. All right, I got a little groove there. Pull it away very gently, and voila, it worked. We actually have a negative imprint of that block. So this we'll be able to use, we'll clean it up of course, but this we'll be able to use for our decorative facing on the concrete blocks that we're going to make from here on out. So you'll get to see the entire process in that over the next couple of weeks. So it worked. So here's our mold after getting the cardboard and everything cleaned off and truing up the edges. You can see we've got a couple of air pockets here that we'll have to take care of, but that won't be too much trouble. And then soon you'll see the next step in getting this ready for the foundry and hopefully our permanent plate for our concrete block machine.